Bi'ur Mishnah Vav. Explanation for Mishnah Vav. And by the way, this is for a while after this Mishnah. We're finished with carrying and with throwing after this Mishnah. For a while. We're going to go back to it some other time later. But for a while we're going, this is the last Mishnah that has to do with carrying and throwing.
הם גם ילמדו על בעיטה?
בעיטה is the same thing as זורק.
זה סן זורק.
It's the same as זורק. There's no question. There's no difference between them. הזורק בשבת בשוגג. This is an interesting concept. Somebody is throwing by mistake. He forgot it's Shabbat. Right? כגון שזרק אבן ושכח ששבת היום. He threw the stone, he forgot it's Shabbos. ונזכר שהוא שבת, he remembered that it's Shabbat, לאחר שיצתה מידו. So
it's up in the air.
It's in the air and now he remembers. So we have a rule. The rule goes like this. In order to be obligated a sacrifice, you need to have
In mind.
be shogeg for the akira. You need to be a shogeg for the uprooting. And you need to, when you place it, you need both parts. So the question is, you need both parts also for the knowledge of shogeg or not? In other words, over here, you were shogeg when you did the uprooting, but the placement was done while you were mazed. You already knew for sure you're not supposed to do it, so-called mazed. Yeah? But you didn't, but you're going to say, hey, but I already remembered, but there's nothing I can do about it now. Yeah? And it was placed while I was amazed. So now the question, what is it? Why am I amazed or a shoigeg? What are you going to say? So I'm neither here nor there. Maybe I'm going to be patur. That's the thing. Okay. ונזכר שהוא שבת לאחר שיצתה מידו. He remembered it Shabbat after it left his hand. לאחר שיצא אבן מידו. קודם שנח על הארץ. And it's very important. Before it rested, he remembered. ונמצא שבתחילת המעשה, so now in the beginning of what he did, בעקירת החפץ היה שוגג. In the beginning he was שוגג. אבל בסוף, בהנחת החפץ היה מזיד. But in the end, when he placed it, he was amazing. It was on purpose. Or שלא נזכר. Maybe even you can say the case, he didn't remember. He threw it, and he thought it was a Friday. So he's throwing the object in a Friday. אלא שלא נחה אבן על הארץ. But it never landed. What happened to it? כי אם קלטה אחר. Somebody was running, and he grabbed it from there. So in other words, the other guy is putting the placement. וכגון שעקר האחר ממקומו ותפס את האבן. Another person caught the stone. והרי זו מלאכה ששניים עשוה. And this is now, two people did it. Or קלטה כלב, or the dog grabbed it in the air. Doesn't have to be a human. בפיו, וכיוון שלא התכוון הזורק שיקלטנה הכלב, and since you didn't have the intention for the dog to catch it, הרי אין כאן הנחה. There's no placement in it. We don't want to go into it. If you threw a frisbee and you had the intention of the dog to catch it, maybe it's a problem. Yeah, maybe it's a problem, but we're not going to discuss this right now. לפי שאין פי הכלב מקום של 4 על 4 טווחים, because the dog doesn't have a place of 4 on 4, and the person's hand doesn't have a place for the 4 on 4, but we consider a hand like it is 4 on 4. And that's only by humans. By dogs, we don't consider it. Okay? Or שנשרפה, or you threw hay over a bonfire, and in the air it got burnt. So it never landed. There was never landing. Nothing landed. באוויר קודם ההנחה. In all those cases, you're patur. You're not obligated. Of course, don't do it. Okay. But you're not obligated. מקורבן חטאת. From a sin sacrifice. Okay. So that we learned what happens if your intention was the beginning of your job, of what you started, was a beshogeg, and the end was bemazid. So it says we need them both to be the same kind. The beginning has to be by mistake, and the end has to be by mistake, or the beginning has to be on purpose, and the end has to be on purpose. If one of them is one way and the other one is another way, you're not obligated to. Okay. What happened? Zarak even beshogeg. A person forgot it's Shabbat. And he was throwing a stone at the bird. He wanted to kill it. Yeah, he wanted to kill the stone, the bird. Beshogeg. Kedei la'asot chabura. He wanted to make injury. To injure. Ben be'adam, whether he wanted to injure a person, ben shenitkaven la'asot chabura ba'adam, whether the intention was to do an injury in a person, uben be'behema, whether he had the intention to do injury in an animal. By the way, chabura, to make an injury by a person, is tolda, is an offspring of shchita. Is an offspring of shchita, and it's asur from the Torah. It's an offspring of slaughtering. Yeah.
So probably all the time.
Excuse me?
All the time.
Yeah. It's an offspring of slaughtering, and it's not allowed to. That's chabura.
Just injuring someone else.
Injury, because what's the idea? Slaughtering, you take blood out. Also over here, maybe the blood doesn't come out of his body, but the blood comes out to the surface of his body. So it's not really slaughtering, but it's an offspring of slaughtering. And the prohibition is from the Torah. It's a Torah that like the Torah. שנתכוון לחבול בבהמה. That he intended to make a wound, to make an injury in the animal. והרי החובל בשבת חייב. Like we're going to learn, somebody who makes an injury to somebody else on Shabbat, to somebody else or to an animal, is obligated. ונזכר שהוא שבת. So he threw it, and he was shogeg. And then he remembered, so now comes, the injury happened
when he's not.
in Mazid.
In Mazid.
Right.
In Mazid, אבל ה-intention בשוגג, זה רק את זה היה שוגג.
But
Because he didn't remember.
Yeah, very good.
Or no?
Very good. But let's think about it now. I'm not going to charge him for carrying. But you know what I'm going to charge him for?
For injury.
For injury. And in the injury, he intended it, he already was mazed. So maybe I can charge him for the injury, and now he's going to get a death penalty. Because I can charge him for the injury, not for the carrying. I'm not charging him for the carrying. Carrying is okay. But the injury is the problem. Not צער בעלי חיים, חובל.
חובל, אבל איפה הצער בעלי חיים?
Nothing to do with him.
אין.
They're not צער בעלי חיים in Shabbat.
Oh, because this is הלכות שבת.
הלכות שבת, yeah.
Sounds like a lot of this is similar to Lashon Hara, right? You're throwing things and you're injuring someone.
Okay. But let's talk practically over here. עד שלא נעשית חבורה. So he remembered when the stone was in the air. קודם שנעשתה החבורה, before the חבורה was started, and even though he's mazed from the Torah now, he's going to be patur. He's not obligated. Why? לפי שתחילתו שוגג וסופו מזיד. Because the stone started, you cannot say the stone, if the stone started was a millimeter before the other guy's body, yeah, the energy that the stone has came from when? From the time you were shogeg. So the chabura, half of it came, the energy of the chabura, the energy of the stone came from the time you were shogeg, therefore you're going to be not obligated. Because you can freeze the time, I don't care. The energy, if you freeze the time and now amaze it, okay, so the stone should fall. No, the energy came from beforehand, so therefore I'm going to connect the beforehand to the afterhand. זה הכלל. So this is the ruling. כל חייבי חטאות, anytime you have to bring a sacrifice, אינם חייבים, you don't have to bring a sacrifice, עד שתחילתן וסופן שגגה. The beginning has to be, you don't remember it's Shabbos, and in the end it has to be that you didn't remember it's Shabbos.
They don't say mazid, למה בשגגה?
He's going to talk.
מזיד וסופה מזיד, לא?
No, he's going to say.
גם?
He's going to say that.
אוקיי.
ושיהיה שוגג גם בתחילת המעשה וגם בסופו. He needs to be שוגג in the beginning of the act and in the act. אבל, and the same thing for mazid. Yeah, and the same thing for mazid. אבל תחילתן שגגה וסופן זדון, But if the beginning it was shgaga and the end was on purpose, or the opposite, or tchilatan zadon vesofa shgaga, or in the beginning, this is a very interesting one, yeah? You threw it and you knew it was Shabbos. And in the air, you forgot it was Shabbos. The opposite of what happened now. Now, it's much easier to think about the first case. You threw the stone, you forgot it Shabbos, what did I do? It says, if you remember it's Shabbos and you're throwing it, how can you, a second later, say, I'm not responsible? But you can think about things like this. For example, you can think, there are some things you can start the process a long time beforehand, before Shabbos, and the process takes 20 minutes. I don't know, you threw a paper airplane from top of the mountain. Okay? So when you threw it, you remember it was Shabbos. Then you walked. It's going to be 20 minutes later, it's going to land. So you can see that the guy can forget. So theoretically, yeah. פטורין מקורבן חטאת, עד שתהא תחילתן וסופם שגגה. And I actually thought it's going to say the Zadon, but it doesn't say the Zadon.
אני לא מבין.
But if you...
בזדון זה בטוח you have to bring חטאת.
I think it doesn't bring the example for Zadon because Zadon needs atra. So how are you going to say you didn't remember? Maybe that's why, but I'm not sure. Yeah. עד שתחילתן וסופן שגגה. So in order to bring a sacrifice, the beginning and the end has to be by mistake. הרב מברטנורה מפרש שזה הכלל. The Rav Bartenura says every time it says זה הכלל, בא לרבות מעביר חפץ ממקום למקום ברשות הרבים. Comes to teach you that this is also for passing an object from one place to another place in the public domain, שאם עקר בשגגה ונזכר שהוא שבת קודם שהניח פטור. So the same thing in carrying. If you thought it was Shabbos in the beginning and you forgot it was Shabbos in the end, or the opposite, you are not obligated. ביארנו את הרישא של משנתנו לפי פירושו של רבא בגמרא. We explained this Mishnah according to the explanation of Rava in the Gemara. אבל רב אשי מבאר אותו בדרך אחרת. רב אשי explains it completely different. How? He says, הזורק, he says somebody who threw, ונזכר לאחר שיצתה מידו, and he remembered after it left his hand. קלטה אחר, if another person caught it, קלטה כלב או שנשרפה, or a dog caught it, or it was burned patur, he's not obligated. Why? Because the same thing we learned with the ani, with the poor person, because somebody else is doing the placement. לפי שלא הייתה כאן הנחה, because you never did the placement. אבל אם נחה, חייב. But if it rested, you're obligated. במה הדברים הנורים שאם נחה חייב? When we say that if it rested, you're obligated, שחזר ושכח, that he remembered and he forgot again. אבל לא חזר ושכח, but if he didn't forget and remember again, פטור. He's פטור. שכל חייבי חטות אינם חייבים עד שתחילתן וסופן שגגה. That even all the חייבי חטות, so in other words, Rav Ashi and Rava are arguing about the case. What happens if you're in the shgaga, you threw it, you remembered it was Shabbos in the end, in the middle, and then you forgot again in the end. So it was shogeg, mezid, shogeg. So according to the first way we learned it, if it was shogeg, mezid, shogeg, now you have the beginning in shogeg and the end in shogeg. Rav Ashi says, no. Since there was a remembering in the middle, it nullifies the two shogigs. And the first Tana says it doesn't nullify it. Beginning and end, that's what we go by. Okay.
So I'm confused still if the beginning and the end are unintentional.
If the beginning and the end are unintentional, then you're obligated to bring a sacrifice.
And you didn't remember Shabbat at any time, right?
Yeah.
So someone sees you and says, oh, it's Shabbat. Oh, so after it's all finished, then you have to bring it.
Or you walk and then you say, oh, it's Shabbat. You just remember that it was Shabbat, whatever the case was. And why does it bring doesn't bring Mazid? I don't know. He doesn't need the kiss. But simple explanation, it's the same thing. I don't see a reason why to distinguish between מזיד and שוגג.
כן, זה וכן במזיד, אבל לא אומרים, כי כנראה זה ברור.
Which one's mezid?
On purpose.